State of Cannabis.
This is the State of Cannabis News Digest, a roundup of this week's key developments in the cannabis industry. Our top stories.
From Arkansas to the Dakotas, a sweeping federal court ruling has thrown the future of hemp-derived THC into uncertainty, while in Texas, a last-minute veto keeps Delta products alive, sparking political rifts and economic relief in equal measure. Out west, California's cannabis industry braces for a tax hike it couldn't stop, even as Oregon floats social lounges and Utah and Wisconsin inch closer to public support for legalization, despite legislative roadblocks. In the Midwest, Nebraska's medical cannabis rollout is mired in red tape, while Ohio's regulatory overhaul stalls, offering temporary relief to thousands of hemp retailers. On the East Coast, Pennsylvania's adult use ambitions are tangled in budget negotiations, and in Washington, D.C., cannabis takes center stage in two major federal debates, one over gun rights and another over the very definition of legal hemp. Stay with us for the full stories and insights on what these changes mean for the future of cannabis in America.
And now here is the deeper look at the key events in the cannabis world this week.
This week, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals handed Arkansas and potentially half the Midwest a decisive blow to the hemp-derived THC industry. The three-judge panel reversed an injunction that had frozen Act 629, Arkansas's 2023 law banning Delta-8, Delta-10, and other similar cannabinoids. Judges said nothing in the Farm Bill forces states to tolerate these products. It simply removed the federal crime. Arkansas Attorney General Tim Griffin wasted no time, giving retailers a grace period of mere weeks to get rid of stock before enforcement begins. For consumers, especially those who relied on Delta products for anxiety or sleep, legal avenues inside Arkansas will soon disappear, likely pushing purchases across state lines or online. Beyond Arkansas, the ruling's footprint covers Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, and the Dakotas, where lawmakers have been watching the case closely.
Late Wednesday, California lawmakers wrapped up budget talks without including a freeze on the state's marijuana excise tax. That means the rate climbs to 19% on July 1st. Governor Gavin Newsom and Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas pushed hard to stop the hike, arguing that it would hurt licensed businesses already squeezed by competition from the untaxed illicit market. But Senate President Pro Tem Mike McGuire, whose district covers part of the Emerald Triangle, blocked the move, citing budget pressures and commitments to programs funded by cannabis revenue. While the industry advocates warn the increase could be self-defeating, driving consumers back underground and shrinking the very tax base lawmakers hope to protect, a separate bill from Assembly member Matt Haney to cap the excise tax at 15% sailed through the Assembly, but still faces a Senate vote, and, under state rules, could not take effect before January of 2026. That leaves dispensaries and consumers facing at least half a year of higher prices. California's legal operators already pay combined state and local taxes that can top 35%. As a result of the news, some retailers have announced price hikes, while others say that they may close. Whether the legislature revisits the issue this session, or waits until next year, will shape the future of California's challenged cannabis economy.
Wake up, tune in, and stay ahead. Every Saturday morning, we bring you a fast, 10 to 15-minute dose of cannabis news from across the nation. No fluff, no digging, just the top stories that matter, clearly explained. Subscribe now and make your mornings smarter.
In Nebraska this week, a clash between voter will and government power is shaping one of the most contentious medical cannabis rollouts in the U.S. 7 months after voters approved a medical marijuana initiative, patients still can't legally obtain cannabis in Nebraska. And now, the state's efforts to implement the law are under pressure from all sides. On Thursday, the Nebraska Medical Cannabis Commission rushed through 90-day emergency rules just ahead of a July 1st legal deadline. The move keeps the program technically on track, and applications for business licenses can begin in October, but advocates say the regulations are among the harshest in the country. They ban smokable flower and vape products entirely and allow only 12 dispensaries across the entire state. Each business can hold just one type of license: growing, processing, transport, or retail, limiting economies of scale. Patients, pharmacists, and small entrepreneurs warn that these limits could stifle access, undercut safety, and handcuff the industry before it starts. Meanwhile, funding shortfalls mean the Commission lacks even the resources to post its rules online, an irony not lost on those who have waited years for a transparent, patient-focused rollout. At the heart of Nebraska's tension is a power struggle. A proposed agreement would hand key enforcement duties to the Department of Health and Human Services, an agency that has previously actively opposed legalization. That move has sparked backlash from advocates who say it violates the intent of the ballot measure and places implementation in hostile hands. Adding to the friction, Nebraska's Attorney General has threatened to sue the Commission, arguing the program conflicts with federal law, even as other U.S. states continue to expand access with minimal interference.
For New York's cannabis supply chain, tax day has been arriving too soon. Under current rules, cultivators and processors must pay the state excise tax just 20 days after each quarter, even if their products are still sitting on shelves, waiting for the slow-growing network of dispensaries to buy them. That mismatch can wipe out cash reserves and stall production. This week, the legislature passed a 5496, which stretches the filing window to 50 days. The change brings cannabis in line with other industries and keeps desperately needed capital in small businesses while the market finds its footing. Trade groups call the extension common sense and note it does not lower the tax rate or the state's take. Governor Kathy Hochul vetoed a broader measure last year, but sponsors worked with tax officials to address operational concerns. If the governor signs the bill, it takes effect immediately, meaning the current quarter's payment, due in May, would slide to mid-July. For many producers, that breathing room could be the difference between expansion and contraction in a market racing toward $1.5 billion in sales. The coming weeks will show whether New York continues to fine-tune its cannabis framework or sticks to deadlines that some say hinder the very businesses the state set out to nurture.
Ohio's cannabis landscape just got a summer extension. Senate Bill 56, the legislature's attempt to dial back parts of the adult use law that voters passed in 2023, won't resurface until fall. The House canceled its only June hearing after Republicans couldn't agree on trade-offs, and Speaker Matt Huffman refused to give up House priorities to push the bill through. SB 56 would have trimmed extract potency to 70%, capped the number of dispensaries across Ohio at 400, restricted public smoking, and, most controversially, moved intoxicating hemp products like Delta-8 gummies into licensed marijuana stores. This move would shutter around 3,000 businesses statewide. Democrats argue the bill disrespects the 57% of voters who legalized weed in the first place. For operators and patients, status quo reigns. As concentrates can stay strong, new dispensaries can keep applying, and hemp drinks remain on grocery shelves. But the reprieve may be temporary. When lawmakers reconvene in September, expect a slimmer bill separating hemp regulation from marijuana tweaks, or a renewed fight over how much the legislature can reshape what Ohioans already approved.
Oregon's cannabis industry may be on the brink of a major shift. A campaign to legalize social consumption lounges, where adults could smoke or eat cannabis products legally, is advancing after organizers gathered more than 1,400 signatures. That clears the initial requirement to begin drafting a ballot title for what could become the Oregon Cannabis Social Lounge Act. If the next phase of signature gathering is successful, voters will decide on the measure in November of 2026.
Pennsylvania is heading toward another late state budget as lawmakers struggle to find agreement on a range of issues, from critical transit funding to the possible legalization of adult use cannabis. Governor Josh Shapiro's budget proposal includes plans to legalize marijuana, which could bring in hundreds of millions in tax revenue. While the House passed a cannabis bill, the Senate quickly rejected it, citing disagreements over a state-run sales model. Bipartisan coalitions continue to push for legalization focused on equity, criminal justice reform, and economic opportunity. With the June 30th deadline likely to pass without a final deal, budget talks are expected to stretch into the summer.
Don't scroll for hours to stay in the know. We've done the work for you. Every Saturday morning, we break down the national cannabis news into one quick episode. Easy to follow, hard to miss. Subscribe now and never fall behind.
In Texas this week, a flurry of cannabis decisions has reshaped the state's medical marijuana landscape while revealing sharp political fractures over hemp-derived THC, highlighting Texas as an unexpected focal point in the U.S. cannabis debate. First, in a move long awaited by advocates, Governor Greg Abbott signed a law expanding Texas's tightly restricted medical cannabis program. The bill significantly broadens access by adding chronic pain, traumatic brain injuries, and terminal illnesses to the list of qualifying conditions. It also permits new delivery methods like patches and vaporizers and requires 9 new dispensaries to open by year's end. New conditions will be accepted starting from the 1st of October of this year. Just 24 hours later, Governor Abbott issued a surprise veto that kept popular hemp-based THC products, like Delta 8 and Delta 9 edibles, legal in Texas. The decision, while controversial, spared thousands of hemp businesses from abrupt shutdowns and preserved access to low-dose THC products for patients and consumers. It also gives lawmakers more time to craft a regulatory framework that balances public health with economic opportunity, potentially shifting the conversation from prohibition to practical oversight. The stakes are high. Texas's hemp industry supports over 50,000 jobs and generates billions annually. And with a special legislative session now scheduled for July, the clash over THC is far from over. Businesses, patients, and policymakers are bracing for another round of debate, this time with national companies and global investors watching closely.
Utah is seeing a shift in public opinion on cannabis, but not yet in public policy. According to a new poll, 53% of voters support recreational marijuana legalization, and an overwhelming 77% back the state's medical cannabis program. Despite this, Republican leaders like Utah Senate President Stuart Adams and House Speaker Mike Schultz say they won't support further legalization, citing social risks seen in other states. Utah legalized medical marijuana in 2018 and now has over 100,000 registered patients. Sales are nearing $600 million, and support spans political and religious lines. Still, legislative leaders say the focus should remain on medical access and not on recreational expansion. Advocates are warning that without reform, public pressure could eventually result in a ballot initiative. But for now, full legalization in Utah remains unlikely, despite a growing majority of support.
Support for marijuana legalization in Wisconsin has steadily grown over the last decade, and now a majority of voters say they want it legal. According to a new Marquette University poll, 67% of respondents favor legalization. This comes as Governor Tony Evers renews his push to legalize cannabis through the state budget, projecting over $58 million in tax revenue during the first year. But efforts to pass reform have once again been thwarted by the GOP-controlled legislature, which stripped the legalization language from the budget bill. A Democratic win in next year's legislative races could finally shift the tide. For patients, consumers, and cannabis entrepreneurs, the outcome of next year's elections could mark a turning point for the state.
Across the U.S. this week, cannabis found itself at the heart of two major federal battles, each raising urgent questions about personal freedoms, public health, and the still murky divide between state legalization and federal law. In one case, the U.S. Supreme Court may soon decide whether Americans who use marijuana, legally or otherwise, can be barred from owning firearms. A brief from the Justice Department urges the court to uphold a decades-old federal statute that prohibits unlawful users of drugs from possessing guns. But lower courts have increasingly questioned that logic, especially when it comes to nonviolent cannabis users. The legal challenge is especially relevant in states with large medical marijuana programs, like Florida and Oklahoma, where patients are now suing to protect their Second Amendment rights. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, lawmakers advanced a controversial amendment that could redefine what counts as legal hemp, effectively banning many consumable products containing THC or related cannabinoids. The provision, tucked into a federal agriculture spending bill, would eliminate the current threshold that allows hemp-derived products like Delta-8 and some full-spectrum CBD to be sold legally. Taken together, the two developments highlight a widening gap between state-level cannabis reform and federal policy. One arm of the government is warning cannabis users they may lose basic rights. Another is preparing to outlaw many of the products they rely on, despite years of legal growth under the 2018 Farm Bill.
This was the State of Cannabis News Digest, available weekly. You can listen to us on all main podcast platforms. To make sure you don't miss out on the latest updates and in-depth analysis of the cannabis industry, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. By subscribing, you'll get notifications for each new episode, helping you stay informed and ahead in the ever-evolving cannabis market. Join us next Saturday for more insights. Until then, keep thriving and stay green.